Teeny Tiny Gods, page 1. Now consider the tortoise and the eagle. The tortoise is a ground-living creature. It's impossible to live nearer the ground without being under it. Its horizons are a few inches away. It has about as good a turner's speed as you need to hunt down a lettuce. It has survived while the rest of evolution has flowed past it by being, on the whole, no threat to anyone and too much trouble to eat. And then there is the eagle, a creature of the air and high places, whose horizons go all the way to the edge of the world. Eyesight keen enough to spot the rustle of some small and squeaky creature half a mile away. All power, all control, lightning death on wings, talons and claws enough to make a meal of anything smaller than it is, and at least a hurried snack out of anything bigger. And yet the eagle will sit for hours on the crag and survey the kingdoms of the world until it spots a distant movement, and then it will focus on the small shell wobbling among the bushes down there on the desert, and it will leap. And a minute later, the tortoise finds the world dropping away from it, and it sees the world for the first time, no longer 1 inch from the ground, but 500 feet in the air, and thinks, what a great friend I have in the eagle. And then the eagle lets go. And almost always the tortoise plunges to its death. Everyone knows why the tortoise does this. Gravity is a habit that is hard to shake off. No one knows why the eagle that does this. There's good eating on a tortoise, but considering the effort involved, there's much better eating on practically anything else. It's simply the delight of eagles to torment tortoises. But of course, what the eagle does not realize is that it is participating in a very crude form of natural selection. One day, a tortoise will learn to fly. The story takes place in desert lands, in shades of umber and orange. When it begins and ends is more problematical, but at least one of its beginnings took place above the snow line, thousands of miles away in the mountains around the hub. One of the recurring philosophical questions is, does a falling tree in the forest make a sound when there is no one to hear? Which says something about the nature of philosophers, because there's always someone in a forest. It may only be a badger, wondering what that cracking noise was, or a squirrel, a bit puzzled by all the scenery going upwards. But someone. At the very least, if it was deep enough in the forest, millions of small gods would have heard it. Things just happen, one after another. They don't care who knows. But history, ah, history is different. History has to be observed. Otherwise, it's not history. It's just, well, things happening one after the other. And of course, it has to be controlled. Otherwise, it might turn into anything. Because history, contrary to popular theories, is kings and dates and battles. And these things have to happen at the right time. This is difficult in a chaotic universe. There are just too many things that go wrong. It's too easy for a general's horse to lose a shoe at the wrong time, or for someone to mishear an order, or for the carrier of the vital message to be waylaid by some men with sticks and a cash flow problem. Then there are wild stories, parasitic growths on the tree of history, trying to bend it to their way. So, history has its caretakers. They live, well, in the nature of things, they live where they are sent. But their spiritual home is in a hidden valley in the high ram tops of the Discworld, where the books of history are kept. These aren't books in which the events of the past are pinned like so many butterflies to a cork. These are the books from which history is derived. There are more than 20,000 of them. Each one is 10 feet high, bound in lead, and the letters are so small that they have to be read with a magnifying glass. When people say, "It is written," it is written here. There are fewer metaphors around than most people think. Every month, the abbot and 2 senior monks go into the cave where the books are kept. It used to be the duty of the abbot alone, but 2 of the reliable monks were included after the unfortunate case of the 59th abbot, who made $1 million in small bets before his fellow monks caught up with him. Besides, it's dangerous to go in alone. The sheer concentratedness of history, sleeting past soundlessly out into the world, can be overwhelming. Time is a drug. Too much of it can kill you. The 493rd abbot folded his wrinkled hands and addressed Lao Zi, one of his most senior monks. The clear air and untroubled life of the secret valley was such that all the monks were senior. Besides, when you work with time every day, some of it tends to rub off. "The place is Omnia," said the abbot, "on the Klatchian coast." "I remember," said Lao Zi. "Young fellow called Osri, wasn't there?" "Things must be carefully observed," said the abbot. "There are pressures, free will, predestination, the power of symbols, turning point. You know all this. haven't been to Omnia for, must be 700 years, said Lousy. Dry place. Shouldn't think there's a ton of good soil in the whole country, either. Off you go then, said the abbess. I shall take my mountains, said Lousy. The climate will be good for them. And he also took his broom and sleeping mat. The history monks don't go in for possessions. They find most things wear out in a century or two. It took him 4 years to get to Omnia. He had to watch a couple of battles and an assassination on the way. Otherwise, they would have just been random events. It was the year of the notional serpent, or 200 years after the declaration of the prophet Abbas, which meant that the time of the 8th prophet was imminent. That was the reliable thing about the church of the great god Om. It had very punctual prophets. You could set your calendar by them if you had one big enough. And as is generally the case, around the time a prophet is expected, the church redoubled its efforts to be holy. This was very much like the bustle you get in any large concern when the auditors are expected, but tended towards taking people suspected of being less holy and putting them to death in hundreds of ingenious ways. This is considered a reliable barometer of the state of one's piety in most of the really popular religions. There's a tendency to declare that there's more backsliding around in the national toboggan championships, that Harry must be torn out, root and branch, and even arm and leg and eye and tongue, and that it's time to wipe the slate clean. Blood is generally considered very efficient for this purpose. And so it came to pass that in the time the great god Om spake unto brother, the chosen one.